Hey guys, tonight you step onto the Nile's cool mud as moonlight paints a slender silver lane across the water and the papyrus leans like sleepy metronomes. Ahead of you, a slim figure moves with unhurried certainty, our courier, his sandals whispering, his shoulders steady, a small leather tube at his back that holds a queen's voice folded into papyrus. We're going to shadow him through the quiet hours, past fishermen rinsing their nets and shrines no bigger than a loaf of bread, into the practical magic of letters that travel farther than armies. You probably won't survive this particular night shift. Jackals have no HR department, and the sun writes people out of the story by noon. But for now, you're safe, and the river is humming your name. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is there. I love seeing the little constellation of our sleepy map. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You keep to the damp edge where footprints blur back into the river's own handwriting. A jackal clocks out for the night shift. Even the crickets sound unionized, chirping in neat little shifts. The runner you follow carries more than papyrus. He carries a way of governing that prefers ink to iron. In Kush, the royal title for a ruling queen or queen mother is Kendake, and from Meroe, the capital set in brick-red sands between the 5th and 6th cataracts, such women direct trade, temples, and treaties with a composure that could quiet a storm. Historians still argue whether Kendake named a reigning queen or a queen mother in different centuries, and whether certain reliefs show Amani Rhaenus or Amanasha Keto. The titles blur like starlight on water, but the authority does not. He breathes in fours. Forsoft steps in, Forsoft steps out. He picks ground that remembers shade, steps around thorn scrub, and pauses at clay pots sunk into the bank to cool beer for morning fishermen. A crocodile's eyes lift like twin beads, then sink again, perhaps disappointed you aren't delivering snacks. Your sandals consider resigning, but you negotiate a truce. You keep walking, and they promise not to file a complaint with ankle management. Night travel makes sense. In this country, the heat edits people out of the narrative by midday, and letters are calmer when they've ridden through the dark. Listen. The river on your left murmurs in vowels. The desert on your right answers in consonants. Between them you travel in grammar. Overhead, the Milky Way is so bluntly bright you could sort reeds by its light. The courier taps the leather tube, checking the weight, checking the seal, because letters are their own small army and their provisions are ink and time. He likes to reach villages just as ovens wake and gossip is still stretching its arms. A message that arrives with bread smells kinder. At a bend where the bank slumps like a sleepy shoulder, two fishermen raise their nets to drain. Water runs off in silver strings. Your sip from a skin flask tastes like swallowed drum beats. The runner bites a pressed date with sesame, tucking a sliver behind his molars, the way some men anchor courage. Quirky traveler's tidbit: along this reach, people sometimes smear a breath of date syrup on their wrists, swearing it keeps gnats politely late to the party. You try it. The gnats take it as a formal invitation, but promise to behave. Low mounds that were evening cooking fires hum with stored warmth. A tiny shrine appears, mud brick with a clay ibis perched on top and a dish of pebbles for wishes. Someone has scratched a boat into the plaster, a child's prayer, or a ferryman's tidy reminder list. You place a pebble anyway, because superstition in the dark is simply good manners. The messenger nods, pleased with your form. Light hands, quiet feet, his eyes say. Speaking aloud would be the loudest thing two people can do in a sleeping landscape. Because every journey needs a map, you make a gentle one. North by the slow kink in the river, east by the taste of dust, west by the way bullfrogs sing on the syllable O. The terrain offers small gifts. A cut bank hides you when a camel bell tinkles on the opposite shore. A clutch of acacia throws down shadows that smell faintly of honey and whetstone. Your companion tests a ford with a stick and lets a finger drift in, reading the current like a scribe reads script. If the flow thickens, he leaves the bank and takes a sandier line, where footprints vanish under dawn's first hush. Behind all of this, mild slog, soft hazards, careful distances, stands the reason you walk. Somewhere ahead, a queen who understands the heft of words trusts papyrus to carry her voice farther than a chariot would carry her body. Not a proclamation shouted to crowds, not a spear lifted against morning, but a letter, sealed with a sign and sent to a human hand. The world turns on many gears, and tonight you are one of the quieter teeth. You could swear the moon checks a list and ticks your name. You smile. The moon does not comment but continues its managerial rounds. He kneels at a spit of sand where the river curves, touches the dampness, and waits. You listen to the long hush between two frog calls. Far downstream, a crocodile grumbles, perhaps composing a politely stern review of tonight's service. You hope for 5 stars. You'll accept 4.5 with notes on presentation. Before you rise, tuck one more true thing into your pocket for when sleep settles. Marrow is not a dot. It is a city of steep-shouldered pyramids and iron furnaces, and the black slag heaps lining its margins are as real as the letters you carry. You stand, and the courier's silhouette folds back into reeds as the stars dim to a friendly low, conspiring with your eyelids. The letter rides easy against his spine. You match his quiet pace, and the Nile resumes its lesson on patience and roots and how a single sentence can carry more cargo than a barge of grain. You walk, you breathe, you listen, the first lesson learned, and the road to Marrow opening like a ribbon of rest beneath your feet. Dawn thins the stars to sugar grains as you ease from river breath into palace breath, the air changing from cool mud to incense and wetted stone. The guards at the gate are half shadow, half bronze, spears held like very polite punctuation. They know the leather tube on your back. A letter walks faster than feet when people recognize its silhouette. You step through a court planted with down palms, their split-crowned fronds casting fan-shaped shadows that turn walls into quiet theater curtains. Somewhere a boy sprinkles water over the paving to coax up a breeze, the original air conditioner powered by dawn and optimism. A cat unrolls itself from a threshold as if it were the archivist on break. You nod to the true director of the writing chamber and proceed before it charges late fees. Inside, color holds its breath. The plaster wears ribbons of ochre and indigo, lotus buds painted along the baseboard like a slow parade. The floor remembers sandals, the wall remembers hands that pressed it smooth, the ceiling remembers smoke that taught it patience. You pass a row of reed mats and low stools where counselors will sit later with the posture of careful commas. For now, you listen to the small sounds diplomacy makes before it speaks, a hinge that sighs, a wick that resets itself, a scribe's cough he saves for dramatic effect. We will meet him soon, but not yet. First, you arrive where words begin, at the Queen's quiet table. The chamber faces an inner court bright with reflected light, gentle as milk. A screen of woven palm filters the day to a soft sift. On the table, a clean sheet of papyrus glows like a sandbar in a green river. Beside it waits a carved box for seals, a string of signet rings resting like moons in a wooden sky, and a ceremonial spoon that pretends not to be vain about its inlaid shell. Your letter is not the only one breathing in this room. There are drafts, notes, and the good paper reserved for words that must successfully cross both sand and mood. In a wide, shallow bowl, embers breathe through pellets of frankincense and myrrh, and the smoke draws slow hieroglyphs in the air even you can almost read. She is already here. The Kandake sits with the kind of stillness that inspires air to behave. In the kingdoms of Kush, the title belongs to ruling queens and queen mothers, women whose names are cut into stone and cast onto gold. Amani Renes, Amani Shaketo, Amani Torre, each a syllable that still glows in archaeology's patient dusk. Mainstream fact to tuck gently under your arm, the Meroitic script, used here from around the 2nd century BCE, survives in both a cursive and a hieroglyphic form, and although scholars can read the sounds of many signs thanks to later decipherment work, the language itself remains only partly understood. You are watching a state write in a voice we can hear, but not fully translate. Historians still argue whether the Candace named in Greek and Roman texts refers to one specific queen or simply the title itself, as outsiders tried to make neat catalogs of power. She studies the papyrus like a navigator puzzles a river at flood. A page is never blank. It is full of consequences waiting to pick a column to stand in. The queen's hair smells lightly of blue lotus and sun-warmed oil, and her bracelets make a sound you feel in your ribs, metal speaking to bone in an old reassuring tongue. An attendant fans her with a palm frond, creating a breeze that rehearses its gentle entrance into the sentence to come. You stand where shadow meets cool light and practice the art of being furniture with lungs. It's a proud tradition, and you're a quick study. No creaks, no thumps, no surprises, except for that one sneeze you negotiate back down with a decisive glare. Sneezes respect confidence, mostly. A slab of black stone along the far wall offers its top to an orderly drift of baskets. Each basket holds pieces of the world, rolled maps marked with river bends and caravan wells, scribbles in Greek from a visiting merchant who wrote as if pursued by bees, small gifts from envoys, ivory counters, a spray of ostrich feathers, a copper fish that ticks faintly when the sun warms it. Quirky tidbit for your travel journal. In some palaces, Attendants mix a pinch of powdered cinnamon into the incense precisely at mid-morning because someone once decided cinnamon smells like agreements about to go well. And tradition, like cats, remembers where the treats are hidden. She glances toward the palace cat, the archivist emeritus, which gives the don't rush me look of administrators the world over, and continues grooming one paw with bureaucratic commitment. A light joke drifts up in you. Even the cat has a better retirement plan than you. You swallow it kindly. Jokes are safer when they move quietly, like boats through papyrus. The Condé reaches for a ring from the seal box, tests its weight, then sets it down again, as if choosing which moon to hang over tomorrow's fields. Her eyes move from the blank to the baskets, to the doorway and back, measuring the letter you delivered against the letter she will send. Across a wall panel, a lion-headed god holds a bow, a petamak, patron of kingship here, and his painted gaze is not fierce, but calm, as if he prefers targets to solve themselves. Another fact curled soft in the corner: the pyramids that will hold those who rule from this city are steep and slender, rising like sharpened thoughts from the desert. They are smaller than the enormous tombs up at Giza, but they have a quickness about them, a poetic brevity you can imagine in skyline form. You notice the chair, wide-armed, with legs carved into modest papyrus bundles, polished by 1,000 careful cloths. The queen's heels barely touch the floor. Power has a way of hovering, even in sandals. She gestures, precisely the motion of someone inviting a sentence to sit, and a door sprite of a servant slips out, returning with the scribe you heard earlier, his cough cleared and his patience starched. Your backpack tube feels suddenly light. Your job becomes the room's job. A gentle breath moves through the chamber, lifting the linen screen, rippling the incense thread. Outside, the first real heat practices scales. Inside, focus collects like morning dew on the rim of a word. The queen raises one hand. Even the cat looks up. You think of last night's jackals punching out, and the crocodile composing that 3-star review with notes on presentation. You think of the date syrup you dabbed on your wrist and how the gnats RSVP'd yes, but behaved. You think how absurdly brave a letter is, a folded square traveling through weather, moods, and insects, convinced it can adjust the future by adjusting a sentence. The queen lowers her hand. A reed pen clears its throat, but that belongs to the next moment. For now, you stand in the hush before script, where diplomacy hums and the walls smell briefly of cinnamon, because agreements, like cats and dawns, prefer to be gently coaxed. The scribe lowers himself as if sitting into a sentence he has used 1,000 times, back straight, breath even, humor tucked behind the ear like a spare reed. He opens a long, thin palette, acacia wood rubbed to patient gloss with 2 sunken wells, black in one, red in the other. You know this from the way the room leans in, black for the body of the message, red for names, headings, and the little nudge that means, please pay attention without panicking. He wets a reed pen in his mouth, then trims it with a small copper knife until the tip looks like a very tidy thought. The soft crackle of the cut threads the quiet. Somewhere, the cat pretends it invented literacy. He lays out the quiet toolkit in an orderly constellation. a packet of soot and gum, ink cakes that smell faintly of smoke and tree, sits to his left. A shell holds clean water. A folded square of linen acts as a blotter. 2 extra reeds, a bold one for emphatic strokes and a thin one for polite whispers, wait like understudies. Beside the palette, he places a little sachet of sand. Mainstream fact for your inner archivist: across the Nile world, carbon ink made from soot mixed with gum arabic is the steady classic, and scribes often used dual-color palettes so red rubric marks could cue structure. Papyrus itself is layered crosswise from the pith of cypress papyrus, pressed and burnished until words slide like boats. He burnishes the sheet with a smooth stone, testing it with a thumbnail, as if greeting an old friend who always remembers your tea order. Today's work refuses to be monolingual. The scribe sets out 3 roads for the letter to walk, each on its own board. First, a clean strip for Meroetic, the local voice, written left to right, brisk and flowing like this city's markets. Second, an Egyptian demotic crib for those along the river who still think in older curves. Third, a compact Greek companion for the Ptolemaic world downstream, who will want their titles arranged like chess and their dates freckled with moon names. Historians still argue whether Meroitic script borrowed more deeply from demotic signs, or whether it grew as a bolder cousin in its own right. Either way, your ear learns quickly that diplomacy speaks in layers. You will carry 1 letter, but it will be 3 at once, as if meaning packs a modest suitcase and a multilingual phrasebook. The scribe warms his hand above the incense, not for mystique, he assures you with a smile, but because warm fingers relax and write kinder lines. He sketches a practice curve on a pottery shard, an ostrakon, the draft pad of Nile offices, then nods, satisfied. Quirky tidbit to tuck beside your date syrup trick: some scribes keep a scrap of leather rubbed with oil to gentle the reed's bite. Others swear by a touch of fig milk to coax ink into more obedient puddles. You try not to look scandalized. Fig milk just sounds like a prank. But he is serious, and his lines do look supple, like reeds agreeing to dance. He gestures for you to bring the courier's tube, and you pass the sealed reply from the southern town. We ghosted through before dawn. He weighs it, not for drama, but for truth. Seals tell weight stories. A light letter means routine courtesies. A heavier one might contain a gold leaf, a woven thread, a small amulet, tokens that say, "We mean it," even before the ink speaks. From the seal box, he picks the Queen's emblem ring and rolls a dab of fine clay between his fingers, the way a baker tests dough. He isn't sealing yet. He's rehearsing trust. He explains, in that steady voice teachers and rivers use, how words cross borders even when feet do not. If the letter must travel by caravan, he will switch to a slightly rougher papyrus that grips ink against dust, and he will instruct the messenger on when to read the stars and when to trust his camel's opinion of a waterhole. If the letter must travel by boat, he will fold the sheet with diagonal courtesy and tuck it into linseed-oiled leather, the original splash-proof sleeve. He smiles at your face. Sea-proof? No, he says. But splash-proof keeps most arguments dry. Light joke number 1 breezes through the room. You resolve to market splash-proof diplomacy as a lifestyle trend and immediately forget because the cat blinks disapproval at commerce. A small tray appears with wooden tablets blackened with gesso and wax tablets grooved by stylus marks, a traveling notepad for temporary sums, place names, and the exact spelling of a prince whose honorifics have honorifics. Greek clerks downstream will scratch quick notes on wax and send the fair copy later. Egyptian boatmen might carry ostraca with tallies of fish and bread. Here, the scribe keeps everything neat with cords and knots. He shows you how a single cord around a bundle can whisper urgent, while two cords mean routine but pleasant. And a blue-dyed thread, rare but real, means please open before the date syrup sets. Light joke number 2 drifts in like a papyrus skiff. You ask whether 3 chords mean panic, and he replies that 3 chords mean this belongs to the cat. He dips into black ink and begins with the quiet scaffolding, titles, courtesies, the bridge before the bridge. You watch the reed make strokes that look like swallows and reeds themselves, a landscape in miniature. He pauses occasionally to switch to red, marking a name, a sanctuary, a date, a let us remember that keeps tempers level. There is no hurry in his hand. He tells you that patience is the fastest courier. Letters written in haste arrive out of breath and say the wrong thing. Light joke number 3 turns up with a yawn. He says, "My reed has better manners than most generals." Between phrases, he shares a little shop lore. If the day grows too hot, he will cool the ink by setting the palette on a damp cloth, because overheated ink dries sullen and flakes. If the papyrus resists, he will stroke it with the burnisher again, the way you might smooth a ruffled blanket. And if a blot happens, because blot demons exist in every century, he will lift it with the edge of a clean shard while it is still shining, then write over the bruise with composure. He shows you a tiny stamp carved with a lotus. Sometimes he gently marks the outer fold with this, not as a seal, but as the scribe's promise. Your letter has been cared for. He reads the lines back under his breath, tasting them for balance. Honor, request, gift, memory. The Greek companion text gets its own careful rhythm. Trireme, greetings that feel like cool water. The Demotic crib offers a river-worn courtesy. The Meroitic main voice holds the queen's warmth and angle. Somewhere in those bends, an agreement prepares to exist. You feel the old truth the courier carried in his breathing. Ink and time are provisions, and you, somehow, are walking with both. You watch the scribe clear a square of table the way a harbor master clears a berth, and now the quiet theater of trust begins. A letter, he reminds you with the tilt of the reed, is really 3 things: the words, the wrapping, and the promise that nobody fingered the middle like a nosy fig seller. Your job is to help the promise look inevitable. He sets the papyrus aside for a breath and brings forward a tray that glints like a small constellation. Signet rings with bezels cut into lions, solar discs, bound papyrus, and neat little rows of signs. A scarab seal in green stone carved on its flat belly, a scoop of pale beeswax, a bowl of dampened clay dark with Nile silt, and a length of linen cord spun tight as a thought, that knows where it's going. Mainstream fact to fold into your pocket. In the Nile world, from pharaonic times through Ptolemaic and Roman rule, letters and jars alike were sealed with clay bullae or wax impressions tied by string to document folds. A signet ring verified identity, and the broken bulla testified to any tampering. Downriver, Greek clerks favor beeswax blended with resin. Upriver, clay rules. Heat can soften wax into gossip, but clay keeps secrets that crack loudly when disturbed. The scribe touches each ring to the light as if asking it to remember itself. The kandake selects one with a calm finger, a lion flanked by lotus, power speaking in garden grammar. Another ring, simpler, belongs to the chief steward for countersigning. A third bears a tidy spray of Meroitic fines for the office, not the person, so continuity outlives sandals. Historians still argue whether certain Meroitic seal motifs stand for personal names or offices or even protective sayings. We can sound out many signs, but some meanings fold their arms and smile mysteriously. Now the choreography. You fold the letter with diagonal courtesy so that its edges lock like respectful neighbors. The linen cord passes through two slit cuts and ties a square knot you could trust with a friendship. The scribe kneads a pea of clay, presses it over the knot, and here he lifts the queen's ring and brings it down with a small, satisfied breath. The impression stares back. Lion, lotus, a border of tiny dots like grains counting themselves. He turns the packet and repeats with the steward's ring, 2 eyes against tampering. A third, smaller blob takes the office mark at the corner like a polite chaperone. You ask about wax, and he smiles the smile of someone who has mended many disasters. Wax, he says, is elegant and quick, perfect for a shaded desk near a sea breeze, with a clerk who uses the word imports as a lullaby. Clay is the desert's friend, cheap, honest, noisily breakable. Light joke number 1 pads in. Wax, he says, is like a fashionable sandal. Clay is the cousin who shows up to help you move house. You resolve to be clay when friends move house, then decide not to tell your back about these resolutions. He keeps a slate of reference impressions, little cupcakes of clay, each pressed with 1 ring and pierced with a reed to dry, stored by cord in a tray. Anyone receiving a royal letter can compare the seal to the tray's memory. Quirky tidbit for your night notes. On the backs of many ancient bullae, archaeologists find imprints of textile weave or twisted cord, accidental fingerprints of wrapping styles. Those patterns are as distinctive as signatures, and more than one future scholar has sighed happily over a thread mark, the way bakers talk about a perfect crumb. The scribe even shows you how he sometimes dusts the fresh clay with ground clean sand, so the seal lifts clean. Sand, he insists, is polite when invited. Oaths matter as much as materials. The courier kneels, palms open like blank pages, and repeats a compact promise before Apedimac and Isis, named together here as if the river and the hunt share one bowl. The formula is practical, not theatrical. He will guard the queen's words against heat, water, blade, and boredom. He will open his mouth only to eat dates or to warn of danger. Should the seal crack without the proper witness, he will enter the palace and confess before the cat. Light joke number 2 leans in. With whiskers, the cat accepts jurisdiction with a professional blink and resumes its audit of the Sunbeam's budget. The scribe demonstrates how tampering tattles. A genuine seal, once broken, flings crumbs that cling to the cord like a messy conscience. A cut and re-glued cord lies flat, dull at the twist. A resealed bulla forgets to carry the imprint of the knot on its back. He shows you a trick, a faint scratch placed in the clay before the impression, a hairline that continues into the ring's edge. When someone opens and reseals, the line misaligns by a breath, and the scribe's eyes, soft as they are, become ledgers. Light joke number 3 rises like a yawn. I trust everyone, but my job is making trust testable. He moves to wax for the Greek companion copy meant for Alexandrian desks. Wax warms over a lamp until it sighs. A drop lands on the fold. The scarab seal presses it with a quick, cool kiss. The wax takes a pale, honey-colored stamp that looks like a small sun doing paperwork. He drizzles a whisper of aromatic resin into the mix, nothing too strong, because pleasant smells encourage pleasant reading. He winks. Not magic, but manners. On the outer fold, he writes a docket in red, to whom, from whom, and the key words of the request, so that the recipient can sort without breaking the seal. That's another mainstream habit. Dockets on papyri saved time, which in bureaucratic mathematics equals surviving summer without 40 meetings. He rolls the finished packet in a snug leather slip and threads it through the courier's strap, then sets a tablet before you to practice matching impressions. Which ring made which mark? What happens if a bulla dries too fast? How a smear at the edge means a hand was shaking or the clay was sulking. Between these lessons, a breeze from the palm screen grazes the wax, and for a moment the room smells of candle, river, and a memory you can't name. The queen watches without comment, weighing perhaps the paradox she conducts daily. Power demands spectacle, yet here it survives by small, verifiable gestures. A thumbprint of lion and lotus, a string that remembers its knot, a courier's oath learned by heart. Somewhere beyond the walls, a crocodile turns under the surface and approves the system. Quiet, ancient, efficient, bitey only when required. Historians still argue whether the queens of Meroe kept separate signets for temple business versus foreign letters, or whether one primary device did most diplomatic heavy lifting, while stewards and priests countersigned. Either way, the practice outlives people. Seals keep speaking after voices stop. You think of last night's date syrup, this morning's cinnamon, and the cat's iron policies on sunbeams. Trust, it seems, is built like this palace, layer by measured layer. each pressed smooth by a steady hand. When the last bulla dries with a soft, satisfied change in color, the scribe nods at the courier. The strap settles across a familiar shoulder. Your fingers, and perhaps your heartbeat, return to normal. A letter now wears its armor, not sharp or loud, but patient. From cataract to sea, anyone with eyes and memory will recognize who touched it and how. The queen rests her hand on the table, and you feel the room settle as if a boat has found the exact center of the river. You step closer to the map boards while the wax calms and the clay sets, and the scribe invites you to plan not for speed, but for softness. Letters, he reminds you with a tilt of the reed, do not win races, they arrive with the fewest bruises. You consider the two companions you met at dawn, the river and the desert, each with a distinct lullaby. The Nile, generous with its steady northerly winds, can push a sail upstream even while the current carries boats downstream. It is the world's coziest two-lane highway, one lane whispering north by wind, the other murmuring south by water. The desert, meanwhile, is a firm pillow of horizons, kinder by night, very honest by noon, and full of footnotes disguised as thorn bushes. You lift a reed pointer. The letter wants the gentlest route, so you will braid both paths, water where it soothes, sand where it spares, shade where it appears as if by grace. The Queen's message must reach a governor who prefers Greek headings with Egyptian calendar notes, so your path needs translators and shade. First, you sketch a river leg, a papyrus skiff to the ferry, then a stout hull that knows the names of the shoals. Mainstream fact to anchor the plan. The Nile's cataracts, those rocky reaches and shallow tongues, turn boating into a conversation with geology. Pilots memorize them like songs, and porters earn their bread precisely because some stretches prefer shoulders to oars. You place neat pebbles on the map where rapids will require respect, and you draw a soft loop inland for each portage, a parenthesis of sand around the river's louder punctuation. Your other hand tests a desert bypass, a camel track that rises like a slow thought from the river and runs parallel until the stones give it back. Dromedary camels, one hump, lots of opinions, have become the desert's very patient librarians, carrying water, fabric, and rumors at a humane pace. Light Joke 1 wanders in chewing a thorn twig. The camel agrees to carry your letter so long as it receives regular compliments on its eyelashes. You promise, sincerely. Diplomacy is 90% tone, 10% eyelashes. You weigh where the message should pass from boat to hoof. Caravans prefer to change rhythm near wells or small fortified stations where skins can be refilled, belts retied, and gossip ironed flat. The scribe inks tiny circles that mean water and tinier slashes that mean shade. A low hill gets a dot because wind there reads the names of travelers and erases them kindly. Quirky tidbit for your notebook. Some caravan leaders tie a small bell to the lead rope at night so the line can keep a sleepy cadence without counting steps. The bell is tuned to "Don't Worry," a very specific note that also discourages snoring. You make a mental note to license the bell for bedroom use. The cat vetoes commercialization with a dignified yawn. The river path has its own music. Boatmen call to one another in vowels that carry and consonants that land. The pilot, in a plaited palm leaf hat, stands in the bow and reads water the way a scribe reads papyrus. Strokes, spaces, the grammar of ripples. When a gust slackens, the crew leans into poles, pushing off the riverbed with the patience of gardeners. Splash-proof diplomacy rides under an oiled leather sleeve, tucked where spray can admire but not edit. Light joke, too, swishes by with the oars. One rower claims he belongs to an athletic club called Current and Wind, and his membership fee is sore shoulders. You consider joining and decide your biceps have an unbreakable treaty with sleep. Between river and desert stand the cataracts, those cranky paragraphs of stone. The plan requires portage, boats lightened, cargo ashore, letters tucked inside tunics like second heartbeats. While men who know the channels thread shallows with ropes and timing. A foreman carries a length of knotted cord to measure progress. When the right knot kisses the right rock, everyone moves as if a sentence reached its comma. Historians still argue whether royal dispatches in the Meroitic Age hugged the river during these passages with local pilots or favored desert skirts to skip the worst teeth of water. Either way, the letter's heartbeat sets the tempo, and you keep that beat steady. You sketch an eastern branch toward the Red Sea, a dry ribbon bending through wadis until it meets ships that love monsoon stories. This is for letters that want Alexandrian ears quickly. Scholars still debate the exact corridor, whether caravans from Meroe primarily took the Atabara to Sea Road down toward ancient Adulis, or preferred the northerly Egyptian-controlled tracks that ended at Berenike. Either choice demands well-timed water and well-paid guides. You underline "pay the guide" twice. The scribe nods with the weary smile of someone who has been saved by a guide twice. A contingency line, faint as breath, threads the map. If wind sulks or a camel unionizes, your courier detours toward a temple whose priests maintain guest jars of water and barley under an honor system older than good manners. The docket on the outer fold helps. A watchful priest can sort by the red rubric and move a message across his courtyard like a polite rumor. Remember the cinnamon pinch in the incense? The scribe dots certain sanctuaries with a tiny CIN to mark pleasant clergy, likely to help with shade. Light joke 3 pads in on sandaled feet. You ask whether CIN stands for cinnamon or certainly in, and the scribe says both, as long as the cat approves the abbreviation. Another leg bends northward where the banks steepen into friendly cliffs. Here you schedule a change of pilots, because local expertise behaves like language, fluent at home, shy 2 bends away. A ferryman with a scar shaped like a hook tells you about a shortcut lagoon where birds argue about fish rights and nobody cares about letters. You pay him with a story of the cat's sunbeam jurisdiction, and he laughs in that quiet way that means he will actually remember your parcel. You penciled the lagoon as a rest inlet with a very firm note: no negotiations with herons. You consider the weather's temper. Too much wind cugs a sail into drama. Too little turns a day into a polite shrug. Heat at its attention spans. Cold, on its rare visits, makes knots clumsy. So you stage departures at stubborn but faithful hours, late evening for caravans, pre-dawn for boats, when the air still believes in fairness. The scribe marks rest days that are not pauses but investments. Letters that arrive exhausted mispronounce names and insult calendars. You add a symbol, 2 lines like eyelids, for sleep stops. Your map looks calmer when people do. Because messages travel farther than geography, you sketch diplomatic weather too. A governor may be in residence or wandering among warehouses that pretend taxes are shy. An Alexandrian clerk may accept clay seals without fuss, or ask for fashionable beeswax with a sigh that could oil a hinge. You prepare both impressions, both courtesies, both deliveries, cloth wrapped for dust, leather sleeved for spray. The plan begins to look like embroidery, river blue threaded with desert gold, knots where decisions happen, tassels of patience at the edges. Over it all, the queen watches the route gather itself, patient as a gardener laying channels for a new bed. You feel again the logic of this palace. Trust made visible, risk made measurable, hope folded small enough to travel. The map smells faintly of ink and warmed leather. Outside, the Nile tries out the day with a shrug, and somewhere in the reeds, a crocodile hums the sound a sealed letter makes when nobody touches it. Almost silence, almost a heartbeat, almost sleep. You arrive at a temple precisely the way a letter prefers to arrive, quietly, early, and smelling faintly of dust warmed by prayer. The courtyard is still more shadow than sun, and the stone lions that flank the gate look like they have agreed to guard, not to judge. On the lintel, a spray of carved lotus and long-tailed birds pretends they are paperwork done far in advance. Your fingers remember the sea eye and the scribe penciled on the map. Pleasant clergy, friendly shade, and the place proves the notation true. 2 jars of cool water wait by the entry, and a sleepy doorkeeper wiggles his toes into palm fiber sandals that squeak just enough to count as hospitality. You pass under the painted gaze of Epidemic, the lion-headed god you've seen in the palace, whose bow looks less like a threat and more like excellent posture for persuading problems to behave. Inside the forecourt, you submit to the temple's version of sorting. A priest with ink-stained fingers, clearly one of the literate breed that believes pages are pets, takes the leather slip from your strap and weighs it not as a tax, but the way a baker weighs a loaf for doneness. He smiles at the feel of good clay under his thumbs, then gestures you toward a low table where offerings and letters share space without jealousy. Small baskets of barley, a coil of incense, a pine cone of dates that will turn any afternoon gentle, and the discreet column of a reed pen stand. Mainstream fact to tuck in your sleeve. Temples up and down the Nile were not just spiritual houses, but administrative spines, with scribal rooms, granaries, and registries. They recorded donations, flood heights, land boundaries, and, at friendly sanctuaries like this, served as relay points, where a docket could be copied into the daybook before a courier or caravan took the next leg. The priest opens a ledger, the papyrus already ruled in red because structure is a kindness, and writes the date across the top with a calm that makes your shoulders soften. His calendar blends worlds, a regnal year for the queen, because time is a polite way to say who sits on which chair, a month name familiar from Egyptian habit, and a tiny Greek note in the margin for the downstream eye that will want to sort by moon and market day. He reads your outer docket in a whisper, sender, recipient, the gist of the request, then copies the essentials and adds a temple receipt mark. The little lotus stamp you noticed on the palace scribe's tray has a cousin here. He taps it in red like a heartbeat. Somewhere in a side room, incense remembers it's supposed to be persuasive and does a better job. He inspects the bullae without breaking them, checking for the knot's ghost on the back, the faint dusted sheen at the edge, the faint diagnostic scratch that runs through the impression. He nods, satisfied. Lion with lotus for the queen, office mark for continuity, steward seal for the invisible hands that keep a court from squeaking. No gossip, he murmurs, which is priest shorthand for no tampering. Like joke number 1 strolls in wearing a serene grin. He adds, "At this hour the gods prefer peace and paperwork, and you vow to embroider that on an office curtain someday." The temple has a mailbox rhythm you fall into without effort. A boy arrives with a reed basket of outgoing notices, tied like modest scrolls. Harvest tithes owed, repairs scheduled on a canal gate, an invitation to a festival whose date has been carefully chosen to avoid the heat's grumpiest week. A woman from the nearby market brings a parcel wrapped in textile for her brother 3 villages north. The priest weighs it in his palm, adds a line to the ledger, and assures her that the next riverboat, captained by a man whose membership in the Current and Wind Club is obvious in his shoulder, will tuck it under the oiled leather sleeve you've come to admire. Splash-proof diplomacy, alive and well. You follow the priest into a side chamber. The walls are pale and cool, the floor swept to that chalky cleanness only temples and dedicated grandmothers achieve. On a shelf, tablets in blackened wood lean like books trying to remember how to be trees. He points at a shallow basin set into the floor near a column's base. "Our flood measure," he says. "When the water creeps this high, we add a note to the ledger and thank the river for remembering us." You picture notched nilometers farther north and understand that a temple is a clock that also happens to smell like frankincense and bread. The cat from the palace is not here, of course, but a local tabby with the same management degree strolls in to audit the morning, tail upright like a quill. Light joke number 2 pads after her. You whisper that the audit is going well, and she awards you a purr and provisional sunbeam access. The priest returns to the central table and sets your letter beside a platter of barley and cakes. He ties a small thread around the leather slip that indicates priority because the sender remembered our last festival with very nice incense, which frankly is the kind of rule all systems should adopt. Quirky tidbit for your travel notebook. This temple stamps some loaves for festival distribution with a tiny mold, bread that has the god's emblem on the crust. It is friendly branding and also a way for storekeepers to count without opening baskets. You admire a loaf imprinted with a lion so relaxed it might nap through blessings. He brings out a wax tablet to compose a short covering note in Greek, a friendly line for the downstream official who will meet the courier 2 days from now at a ferry shaded by sycamores. The phrasing is both pious and practical. Greetings, the assurance of careful custody, the information that a caravan has room for one more letter if the governor wishes a reply to ride back on the same goodwill. Historians still argue whether temples like the great enclosure at Masaurat were pilgrimage mazes, elephant schools, or logistics depots. He says, why not all three on different afternoons? You smile. Multi-purpose holiness feels economical. Outside, a bell tinkles. The caravan you want has arrived to water beasts and hear the morning's gossip. The priest gives the courier a cup of water, and you a glance that means, eat a date. People write better after dates. You comply, and immediately become friendlier toward every vowel in the room. Light joke number 3 sidles up in a linen robe. The priest notes that donors who bring dates always receive faster blessings. And you ask whether that's official policy. He confirms with a gravely comic nod that the gods appreciate thoughtful snacks. Before you leave, he adds a final timestamp, his temple's day mark, in red, beside the docket. The seal remains unbroken, the packet remains itself, the route now includes this square of quiet. He slides the letter into a small reed basket lined with linen, splash-proof meets dust-proof, and ties it to the lead camel's saddle with a knot that will yield politely at its destination. The camel blinks its grand eyelashes at you. You remember your compliment promises and deliver them sincerely. The priest raises a hand in a blessing shaped like good bookkeeping. The courtyard brightens. The gate lions approve with silence. You step back into the road's light and think about what you just watched. A sanctuary acting as a patient hub, a stone mailbox with incense and ledgers, a community that keeps time with kindness. The thread from palace to river to temple to road holds. Cinnamon still ghost notes the air, and the world feels sorted without being stern. Your feet, remembering the soft cadence of bells and pens, take the path the letter prefers. Onward, gently, with shade in mind. You angle north with the caravan until the granite shoulders of the river close in, and the water begins speaking in consonants again. Elephantine on one side, Syene on the other, where Greek, Egyptian, and Nubian all order breakfast from the same ledger. The courier touches the leather slip at his chest, and you pat the reed basket slung behind the saddle. Not just the letter in 3 voices, but gifts chosen to say, we came as neighbors, not as negotiators who raise their voices. Gold leaf wrapped in cloth the color of ripe dates, a small worked ivory plaque carved with lotus and lion, nothing gaudy, tasteful bravery. A braid of incense as polite as a bow, and a length of fine Meroitic textile that drapes like water. Mainstream fact to set your feet. Under the Ptolemies, Greek kings ruling Egypt from 305 to 30 BCE, administration hums in Greek. Customs houses line the southern frontier, and officials with titles like strategos and oikonomos read dockets before they read people. You rehearse the Greek companion letter under your breath as the customs wicket yawns open. Charin, greetings, warm but not sticky. Titles in the right order because order is how paperwork stays calm. A sentence that praises the fairness of local water gauges, flattery by hydraulics, and the foresight of placing shade where travelers grow polite. You imagine the clerk ticking the boxes in his head. Proper salutation, check. Respectful verbs, check. No verbs trying to do push-ups, double check. Light joke number 1, polishes its sandals. Your vowels are so careful that even the olives on a plate of lunch nod along. The official who appears wears cool linen, a stylus behind one ear, and the look of someone who remembers every number that ever tried to be sneaky. He reads your docket without touching the seals, the way a baker reads crust to judge crumb. He appreciates the red rubric, sender, recipient, gist, because red is the universal color of you can find things quickly without pretending you enjoy chaos. He gestures you to a woven mat in shade, and an assistant brings watered wine scented with mint. Quirky tidbit wafts with the cup. Some frontier clerks tuck a sprig of mint into ink during summer, believing it keeps the flies from composing their own footnotes on the page. Does it work? The flies decline to comment. The mint smells like good manners, regardless. You lay the gifts one by one, as if placing syllables. Gold leaf first, because sunlight deserves to introduce friends. The ivory plaque second, wrapped so the lion looks modest. The incense third, already imagining itself as tomorrow's pleasant afternoon. And the textile last, unfolded briefly to show the weave's discipline. The clerk admires, without committing to admiration, an Alexandrian sport, and asks whether the Queen's message is brief. You answer truthfully. The part that belongs to you is brief. The part that belongs to the reader will take as long as fairness requires. Light joke number 2 coasts in like a little sailboat. You add that fairness travels faster when seated comfortably, and he smiles because the mat is indeed comfortable. He calls for a translator anyway, because accuracy sleeps badly when overconfident, and the three of you examine the Greek companion text together. The letter thanks the governor for recent sanity along the ferries, notes that last flood's demeanor has put everyone in the mood to be reasonable, and proposes a schedule for ivory and gold to move without inventing quarrels along the way. Historians still argue whether Ptolemaic garrisons at Elephantine taxed southern caravans directly from royal desks, or subcontracted tolls to temple estates that kept better local calculators. Either way, your phrasing floats where numbers used to sink. Not a demand, not a plea, but a promise to keep ledgers and tempers cool. You watch how Greek likes compliments to arrive, not on trumpets, but wrapped inside practicalities. Your letter praises the lighthouse at Pharos as a friend to all sailors, while asking that a particular barge be allowed to dock before the wind naps. It compliments the museum's scholars on their owl-eyed patience, while enclosing a line of Merowitic for some curious scribe to copy and practice, like a neighbor bringing over a puzzle. Light joke number 3 flaps its wings quietly. You consider sending a membership application to the Current and Wind Athletic Club on behalf of that barge. The clerk recommends stretching beforehand, bureaucratically. He fingers the textile, admires the iron's soft sheen. Yes, a small bar of Merowitic iron made the journey too, because strength is a kind of flattery, and then nods toward the seals. He says, "We will dock it, not open," and you watch him write an Alexandrian calendar note in the margin, a moon name that will mean something to a desk farther north. He adds a string of Greek honorifics that are essentially well-placed cushions: eunoia, goodwill; aspaleia, safety; irene, peace. Your letter, in reply, uses the Greek word for kinship, philia, sparingly, not as bait, but as acknowledgement of a river that keeps introducing people to each other. Somewhere on the quay, a monkey tries to negotiate with a fig seller and loses gracefully. You take it as a sign to keep your own negotiations light. A boat arriving from the north flashes a stitched blue eye on its prow against bad luck, and you remember your sand-dusted seals and think both are small, testable hopes. The clerk mentions a rumor of Roman envoys watching everything with the patience of granite. You tilt your head. He tilts his. He admires the letters multiplied bodies, Meroitic heart, demonic crib, Greek companion, because redundancy is civility's favorite pillow. He produces a narrow clay ticket and applies a scarab stamp, the Ptolemaic office mark for transit approved, and threads it through your basket strap with the kind of knot that looks relaxed and is not. He pens a brief covering note for Alexandria, praising the letter's clarity without heat, and files a copy under a docket string you suspect is older than some gods. He says, "There will be wind tonight, and the upstream crew likes to brag about their shoulders. Your message will sleep under leather." You think of splash-proof diplomacy and the oiled sleeve, and the river in your chest settles a little. Before you go, he makes a suggestion. Include with future letters a tiny tally of how many people touched the seals: scribe, steward, courier, temple priest, because nothing soothes an Alexandrian desk like a line of numbers that behaved. You agree, pleased to discover that trust is sometimes a math problem with friendly commas. He offers you a shallow bowl where the water has been sitting in shade. You drink and tell your thanks to the mint leaf floating there. It refuses to take credit, which is very mint of it. As you step back into sun, the ivory in your hands feels cool, the gold leaf light as an opinion ready to be changed by better evidence. The clerk's stylus scratches behind you, adding the final note. Your letter climbs a gangplank under a sail the color of a well-washed sheet, and someone hums, maybe a boatman, maybe the river. You pace the edge, listening to the consonants softened to vowels again. Negotiation by letter is simply conversation across time zones, one voice asleep while the other speaks, both trusting the seal to keep tone unwrinkled. You pat the basket. The cat, had she traveled, would approve the paperwork. By the time you reach the next quay, the sun has found its humane setting, late afternoon gold, forgiving to eyes and letters alike. The basket on your shoulder carries a new weight. Replies bound for people who name months after emperors and straighten map edges with a ruler. The war has cooled to a memory that still sweats, but it no longer shouts. Now messages move in both directions, Meroe to Alexandria, Alexandria to wherever Augustus is pausing to admire his own schedule, each packet wearing clay or wax like calm faces. You feel it in the boat crews, too. Their jokes are longer, their shoulders less martial. A letter can unspool a knot a spear only tightens. On the temple steps where you wait for the pilot, a carved lion looks across the water as if remembering louder days. Mainstream fact to lay gently on the rail. In the years after 25 BCE, the Roman prefect Gaius Petronius pushed south and the Cushites pushed back. Cities burned, statues fell, and one bronze head of Augustus, yes, that famous calm face, traveled all the way to Meroe, where it was buried beneath a threshold so visitors would quietly, deliberately walk over Rome with every step. The object will sleep there for almost 2 millennia before anyone tells us the story again. For now, it hums its bronze lullaby below a floor. Historians still argue whether Amanirenas herself ordered that placement as ritual choreography, or whether it was a practical reuse of scrap for stairs, the old debate where symbolism and construction budget sip the same wine. Your task today is much softer. One of the Queen's letters, written in that three-voiced way you've come to love, rides with a polite cover note to an Alexandrian office and beyond, following the emperor's itinerary like a cat shadowing a patch of sun. The Greek opening is properly cool, chirene without perfume, and the melodic heart of it asks for what peace wants, a border that behaves, a tax that remembers fairness, and room for caravans to carry gold, iron, and stories without tripping over soldiers' tempers. A demotic crib accompanies for river folk who still keep their notebooks in older curves. Redundancy remains the mother of exhalations. The customs clerk you met before recognizes the docket's tidy red and pours out mint water with a flourish, which continues to be the frontier's favorite truce. He points with the stylus toward the northern road. Word is, he says, the princeps is at Samos. He shrugs in a way that means even emperors obey wind and logistics. You picture your letter switching boats at Alexandria, skimming along Aegean shores, landing on an island where sandalwood and decisions mix in the same afternoon. Scholars still debate the precise mechanics. Did envoys from Meroe meet Augustus on Samos in 2120 BCE with spoken terms, while letters followed with the paperwork? Did scribes backfill the agreement after handshakes? Either way, the treaty that emerges will let everyone breathe. Rome steps back to a saner frontier, and the annual tribute some Romans dreamed of remains softly a dream. On the deck, the courier tucks your packet under the leather sleeve you trust as much as you trust shade. Splash-proof diplomacy, you murmur, and a rower grins, rolling his shoulders like a member in good standing of the Current and Wind Club. Light joke number 1 wipes its sandals and enters. You ask whether the club has dues. He says yes, exactly 1 shoulder per oar, and you pay by napping responsibly at noon. The sail takes a lazy bite of breeze, and the boat noses into the slow lane north, where the river does the heavy lifting, and people pretend to help. At a small station near the cataract's calmer edge, A Roman auxiliary writes down your docket with the competent boredom of someone who has seen either too many letters or too much sun. He squints at the seals, likes the clay's honesty, and stamps a little lead ticket with a she-wolf just because his desk enjoys canine themes. Quirky tidbit for your road book. Some posts string such tickets on a wire like prayer beads and then brag about the length of the wire during festivals. It is not official policy, but the wire does make a pleasing clink. He tastes the Greek companion text out loud, nods at the phrase irene tucked where it can do good without preening, and in a mood of uncharacteristic generosity, suggests the best olive vendor upriver. You buy a small jar for the boat. Peace, you discover, pairs well with olives. You rehearse the heart of the request, because tone is geography too. The letter praises Roman efficiency where it is actually efficient, road repairs, water stairs that don't collapse under sandals, then asks that certain garrisons stop being enthusiastic about tolls that were never agreed. A line about mutually honorable border stones offers a face-saving way to move markers without admitting which hand shoves. A discreet mention of iron shipments states the obvious. Swords are hungry, but so are plowshares, and markets prefer moderated appetites. Light joke number 2 lounges near the amphoras. You suggest that toll collectors snack on dates whenever tempted to collect too much. The auxiliary writes it down like policy and laughs only with his eyes. Night slides over the river with its usual efficiency, and star-pricked canvas above you remembers constellations that sailed here long before Greek syllables practiced their landings. You think of the Queen, the one the Roman writers will call Candace, and the way Strabo will later note that she was brave and perhaps one-eyed, though historians still argue whether the detail is accuracy, metaphor, or an author's stylish flourish. You prefer the eye that watches ink dry. Your own eye watches a lamp guttering in a prow basket, and you lean to shield it as if gentleness were an instinct as old as fire. When the letter reaches Alexandria, a librarian's apprentice will copy the Greek so cleanly that the margins look like a nap. A clerk will note in an account book that tribute is not to be demanded, that border stones are to be relieved of their athletic ambitions, that envoys are to be greeted without checking their sandals for hidden agendas. You imagine the emperor's own eyes passing over the phrases. No, he won't open the sealed Meroic. That's between queens. And you picture him under the Samos sun deciding that a story without spears makes better theater. Light joke number 3 twirls a laurel. You consider sending him a travel-sized wreath labeled "For decisions that make afternoons nap-friendly." Your boat slides into a reed-framed inlet where herons hold town meetings with their knees. You do not negotiate with herons, remember the rule, but you admire their unity. The pilot ties off with a knot that would pass any temple inspection. The letter sleeps under leather. The wax and clay have cooled to a color that means we've survived this much of the day. You stretch and think of the bronze head sleeping under a threshold at Meroe, and how strange it is that a heavy object and a light letter that can lean the same direction, away from shouting, toward rooms where people sign their names and go home in time for olives. Morning will take the packet onward, up the thread to the sea, then to whichever island or palace has lured the emperor with shade and schedule. For now you rest belly down on the warm deck, breathe the mint that someone tucked into the ink to keep flies polite, and let the river repeat what treaties try to say. We can carry many things if we balance them well and talk to the wind first. You sit again at the low table where smoke writes slow hieroglyphs into the room, and the reed palette waits like a courteous metronome. And the scribe decides today is about temperature, the temperature of tone. Openings, he tells you, are not doors. They are curtains that decide how much light to admit. You hold the reed and breathe the way the courier taught you, 4 in, 4 out, then practice the quiet architecture of greeting. In Meroitic, the queen's title sits early, steady as a chair. Kadake, as Greek ears will say, Candace, while an Egyptian crib might add the old triad of blessings, life, prosperity, health, the famous Ankh, Uzha, Seneb, because courtesy loves familiar furniture. Mainstream fact, tucked like a folded cushion, Egyptian letters for centuries begin with those formulae, and Greek ones with that efficient kairan, greetings, often closing with eroso, be strong, be well. You borrow both as needed, since a border is not a fence, but a shelf where you keep several kinds of cups. Now, honorifics. You learn to place the other person's name on the highest step, to the governor beloved of fair measures, and you keep verbs disciplined, not athletic, no lunging, no arm waving. Humor belongs here too, but it must travel in sandals, not spurs. The scribe suggests a smile that complements infrastructure. May your shade awnings be as accurate as your tax tallies, because the quickest way to relax a desk is to praise its ability to keep people from melting. Historians still argue whether specific Meroitic letter formulae survive to us or whether we reconstruct them from inscriptions and Greek-Egyptian models. Either way, your hand learns a blended etiquette that sounds local at both ends of the road. You test openings out loud, tasting vowels the way boatmen taste wind. To the steward who persuades ledgers to sleep at night, the scribe nods, ledgers like lullabies. From the Kandake, whose lions prefer gardens, he smiles at the lion and lotus seal's whisper. Light joke number 1 tiptoes across the mat. You add a postscript promising to send a membership card to the Current and Wind Athletic Club. The cat, acting in her capacity as director of tone, allows it only if the joke carries no exclamation marks. You obediently calm the punctuation. Here you learn the delicate art of self-positioning. In Greek, you can soften rank without surrendering it. We request rather than we command, because requests arrive smoother and tend to unpack themselves. In demotic notes, the scribe shows you the servant speaks formula that Egyptian letters used to step down the stair a little before climbing back up with the queen's voice. He laughs at your face. No, humility is not an error. It is a tool like beeswax or clay. You choose which one keeps the seals of conversation from cracking. To keep tone warm, not hot, you learn to thread compliments with useful nouns, roads, ferries, granaries, shade. Your fairy timetables keep tempers cooler than jars at dusk. Your granary seals look calmer than the moon. You learn to let dates and water sit beside any request, at least on the page. With this letter travel small gifts of incense and cloth, because a good day should smell like itself. Quirky tidbit floats up like cinnamon from the brazier. Many desks keep lucky day calendars, little almanacs of auspicious and grumpy dates. If you open with a mention that your letter sails on a favorable day, the reader's shoulders loosen up as if someone moved a chair to kinder shade. Closings deserve slow hands. You try a melodic cadence the scribe has heard in temple dedications, steady, river paced. Then add a Greek eroso at the end, like a cool stone on the tongue. The scribe suggests a playful bow that won't bruise. May your ink stay undisturbed by flies and decisions, and a quiet note that implies confidence in the relationship rather than fear of its failure. Light joke number 2 props its elbows on the table. You offer to send, along with the reply pouch, a very small bell tuned to "Don't Worry," the caravanner's favorite night note. The scribe replies that if the bell arrives, please do not attach it to a tax collector. As the reed warms in your fingers, you discover that sentences have shoulders. Heavy ones shove, light ones lift, and balanced ones do the polite work of carrying meaning in public without knocking into other pedestrians. You write, "We remember your fairness last season at the portage, and our granaries remember you in incense," and you see the scribe's eyes approve. He shows you a trick. When you must disagree, you begin with shared nouns, border stones, caravan wells, ferry ropes. Then ask the verb to walk gently. Let the stones return to their old shade. The disagreement fits like a stone back into a wall, not like a spear into a rib. Your draft earns its little red rubric, names, place, gist, because finding is half of kindness. You sprinkle a pinch of drying sand, that patient confetti, and brush it off with the linen's breath. The cat inspects the margins as if searching for unauthorized adjectives. She blinks once, the official stamp of feline approval. You promise her a sunbeam in the acknowledgments. She pretends not to care. Light joke number 3 dozes by the brazier. You consider adding, "P.S. We refuse to negotiate with herons," to every letter as a general policy statement. The scribe admits it would be admired on the K and puzzled in the archive. Between one sentence and the next, you slide in a small shared memory. The mint leaf in your clerk's ink last summer kept everyone delicate, because people open faster when they feel seen. You recall the cinnamon notation, CIN, on temple maps, and smile. Sometimes an abbreviation can carry more goodwill than an oration. You remember wax for seaside desks, and clay for desert roots, and you keep your tone like those materials. Wax where you want swift impressions, clay where you want honest cracks if someone fiddles. And if a joke travels with it, you make sure it wears sandals, not spurs. Sandals are easier to forgive under bright sun. When you read the final draft aloud, the Queen's name sits in light. the governors in shade that flatters rather than hides, and the verbs behave. Historians still argue whether Candace in Roman writers meant Amanirenas in particular or the office in general, and whether Strabo's famous one-eyed detail was memoir, metaphor, or mischief. What matters to your read is simpler. The voice on this page is steady enough to move stones without breaking them, and friendly enough to smell faintly of dates. You dot the docket in red. Promise the cat you will maintain her sunbeam in future correspondence, and watch the scribe fold the sheet with the same patience the river uses when rounding a bend. Tone, you learn, is temperature. You keep it warm as bread, cool as mint water, and never hot enough to scald your own fingers. The seals will do their work later. For now, words are already placing shade where tempers usually stand, and you feel the letter grow lighter, as if it discovered how to walk itself to the door. The circle gathers the way shade pools under an awning, without hurry, with purpose. You take a low seat just inside the ring, read across your knees, the cat in her usual oversight position like a velvet paperweight. The queen tips her head, and the room aligns around that small astronomy. Treasury to your left, ironworks to your right, a priestess of a moon who smells faintly of blue lotus, an elder auntie whose bracelets clink like good advice, and a caravan captain whose sandals carry dust from 5 different wells. Words like water will be poured here and then channeled into the letter before the ink decides to dry. The treasurer begins, fingertips pressed together as if counting quietly. Grain tallies look calm. Iron shipments grumble to be moved before the sun remembers its temper. Incense stores are fine if nobody gets festive too early. Mainstream fact steadies the room. Moreau is an iron city. Its long black slag heaps still sleeping outside the walls like domesticated hills. Proof that furnaces have been taught to roar on schedule. The Iron Chief confirms with a nod. He prefers verbs like temper, quench, and carry, and suggests your letter praise Roman engineers for maintaining river stairs while reminding them that tolls on iron help neither plows nor soldiers behave. The priestess speaks next, palms opening like a temple door. She wants the letter to acknowledge festivals, flood marks, and the mutual politeness of lions and lotuses, Apidamac's domain, and the rivers, because nothing oils a border like shared calendars. She sets a small bowl of water in the center, and the surface trembles a little, as if already rehearsing the tone you practiced yesterday. Light joke number 1 lifts an eyebrow. The caravan captain mutters that if water could read Greek, negotiations would end before lunch. The cat issues a memo reminding everyone that liquids are already bilingual, wet in every language. You notice how the queen listens, forward when numbers arrive, back when titles try to put on too much jewelry, sideways when humor helps a detail walk into the room without making enemies. Her sister, eyes bright, bracelets practical, proposes a small flourish for the greeting, something like, "May your granary seals outlast your sandals," which is both blessing and gentle incentive to use better chord. You try it under your breath. It lands soft. The auntie approves and passes a date as if you've successfully crossed a minor ritual bridge. They consult maps, not to admire their neatness, but to rehearse the root of meaning. Temple to ferry, ferry to clerk, clerk to governor, governor to someone whose sandals sit closer to Augustus's traveling desk than yours do. The caravan captain points with a thorn sliver. Here we add a Greek line praising shade, he says, because this customs post thinks every improvement its idea if you plant it under a canopy. Light joke number 2 slouches amiably against a painted pillar. He swears certain officials have never argued in direct sun, and the priestess counters that this is proof of divine intelligence, not bureaucracy. A runner arrives with a wax tablet from a northern well, 3 words and a number, the kind of message that tastes like practical dust. The treasurer scans it, then taps it back to you. A shipment of salt is late, which will make fish opinionated and markets gloomy. The queen glances at the letter draft you made with the scribe and asks for 1 sentence in Demotic added near the end. We share concerns for the fish market's cheer. It's a small kindness disguised as a logistics note. Exactly the sort of phrase a clerk will repeat out loud and then quietly set in motion because it sounds like common sense. Quirky Tidbit jogs into the circle in sandals. Before anyone speaks at length, they pass around a smooth river stone the size of a plum, the silence stone. Whoever holds it may talk, whoever doesn't may sip water and consider. It's not law, just house custom, but the auntie swears meetings finish faster and nobody forgets their manners. You turn the stone in your palm. It feels cool and persuasive, like mint water for your sentences. The cat tests it with a paw and allows that the policy seems enforceable. Now comes the part where tone and policy braid. The Iron Chief suggests asking Rome to let iron move like evening shade, predictable, gentle, unstoppable, and to keep the tax lane for ivory wide enough for courtesy to walk beside profit. The priestess recommends a nod to shared deities, not sermon, just neighborliness. Perhaps a blessing that roads and river stairs both prefer to carry pilgrims and cargo more than quarrels. Historians still argue whether the Kushite court operated with a formal council of titled ministers or a more fluid network of palace households and temple advisors. The inscriptions give names, the reliefs give gestures, but the minutes of meetings like this sleep in sand. What you feel is simple. Council steers ink the way a pilot steers a hull. Settle pressure, constant listening. The Queen looks to you then, not for answers, but for sentences that can carry the room's decisions without wobbling. You adjust openings. To the governor, whose shade awnings tell time kindly. You fold in the auntie's sandals line, the priestess's calendar nod, the Iron Chief's plowshare and sword balance, the treasurer's gentle warning about salt and fish moods. You add the caravan captain's favorite verb to spare, as in spare the caravan's double counts at noon, which is how frontier clerks say, let's not do this the hard way. 3 small laughs loosen the air. Light joke number 3 pads across the mats when you write, our courier travels with a bell tuned to don't worry. We hope your desk keeps the same pitch. The caravan captain wants a membership badge to the Current and Wind Club printed in the margin. The Queen smiles without promising, which is the royal art of saying maybe. The cat, who has not forgotten sunbeam allocations, directs you with one unmoving whisker to eliminate an exclamation point that tried to sneak in near a compliment. You obey. Punctuation should never outshine policy. Mainstream gravity returns as the priestess stands and traces a small sign in the air. Nothing flamboyant, just a line that remembers the river's patience. You think of Gebel Barkal up at Napata, the old sacred mountain where Amun's crown once leaned on the skyline, and of how power moved to Meroe with iron and trade winds and still carried a piece of that mountain in its pocket. The queen taps the letter, and the circle settles. You feel the council in your bones. Honor first, request in the middle, memory at the end. Memory is how letters bend futures without raising voices. When the meeting dissolves, no one declares victory. They gather bracelets, sandals, and the silent stone, and check the window for what the day plans to do to pedestrians. You carry the draft back toward the scribe, aware of how many hands steadied its shoulders before it tried to walk. Outside, the light is the color of cool bread. The cat leads as always without checking whether anyone follows, and you trail behind, already hearing how the reed will turn this room's murmurs into a river that even Roman boats can't quite row against. You learn to pack a letter, the way gardeners pack a cutting, something living, wrapped with care, carrying enough kindness to take root where it lands. The scribe spreads a mat and invites you to lay out what diplomacy wears when it wants to feel welcome. A folded length of fine Meroitic cloth with a pattern that looks like the river thinking. A small braid of incense that promises afternoons will remember how to be gentle. A shallow dish of dates glazed with that whisper of syrup you dabbed on your wrist the other night. A palm-sized bar of iron, oiled and honest, and a modest slip of gold leaf, because even practical people enjoy a sentence that shines at the right word. Gifts, the scribe says, not bribes. Bribes are loud. Gifts are sentences with please and thank you already inside. You weigh what to give to whom, because generosity works best when it fits the recipient like shade fits the hour. For the customs desk that smells faintly of mint and ink, you tuck a fresh palm mat and a bit of blue-dyed twine, useful, cheerful, completely deniable as flattery. For the governor's secretary, who always asks the right questions, a small vial of perfumed oil sealed in glass, nothing extravagant, just evening jasmine to persuade meetings to end on time. For the temple that stamped your docket so kindly, 2 stamped loaves with a relaxed lion on their crust and a little bag of cinnamon, which the CIN on your map now stands for twice over. Quirky tidbit for your travel journal. Traders sometimes rub a thread with frankincense and coil it into a tiny rosette tied to the gift bundle. It makes the parcel smell like a festival, and it doubles as fire-starting grace if someone has to boil water in a hurry. Mainstream fact to rest your planning on. Across the Nile world and the Mediterranean, formal exchanges ride on gifts as much as on words. Greek xenia, guest friendship, expects tokens that say, "We remember you." Roman emetitia likes reciprocity with receipts. And old Egyptian letters often list greeting gifts of linen, oil, and grain, the way good neighbors list favors. From Kush, the catalog reads like a patient sandy treasure chest: gold, ivory, ebony, ostrich feathers, iron, and textiles that drape like water. Historians still argue whether the exchanges after the Amonarinus Augustus settlement were ever tribute in Roman bookkeeping or consciously framed by Cush as reciprocal gifts between equals. The cat, whose ethics committee meets daily in sunbeams, files this under "Label the shelves as you wish, the bread still tastes like bread." You assemble packets with an ear for tone. A letter that asks for fairies to behave ships a mat for the ticket window and a jar of date honey for the clerk's afternoon courage. A note proposing iron quotas carries naturally a neat iron bar with the surface dressed so a Roman engineer can admire the grain. A request to adjust a border stone travels with a small carved lion for the local shrine, lion and lotus, a miniature of the seal, because stones respond better when reminded that their job is shade, not drama. Light joke number 1 jogs in wearing sandals. You add a tag that reads, "For official use in preventing quarrels," and the scribe suggests a second tag that reads, "Results may vary, consult your local heron." You still refuse to negotiate with herons, but you respect their legal team. There's an art to sending kindness to systems, not only to people. The caravan captain, dusty and pleased to be consulted, proposes a coil of sturdy rope for the portage foreman, because good rope shortens arguments. The priestess recommends lamp oil for the temple's side chamber, so ledgers won't blink at dusk. The treasurer quietly adds a packet marked for the well keeper, spare leather liners for the bucket mouth. No one remembers that man until the taste of the village changes. The queen nods at each, approving the sort of gift that doesn't require a speech, then has you write a single lapidary line in the letter. Please receive these practical courtesies for the comfort of your hands. You keep a ledger of your generosity, because kindness that can be audited is kindness that can be continued. The scribe shows you how to docket gifts on the outer fold, not prices, never that, but categories and weights. Cloth, 2 lengths. Incense, light braid. Iron, 1 hand bar. Downstream desks enjoy numbers that behave. Upstream sanctuaries enjoy notes that read like memory. Light joke number 2 strolls over from the Current and Wind Club. The rowers demand a jar of olives for their shoulder dues. You approve it and write "for morale" in the margin, which is ancient administrative for "we like you and wish you naps." Packing is choreography. Dates at the top, so the first person who opens their palm to you meets sweetness. Iron against the letter, so the packet carries a quiet gravity. Incense rosette tied to the cord, so every hand that moves it inherits a little festival. The scribe sprinkles a pinch of clean sand over the oil-slicked leather slip, so the bundle grips without sticking, and pats it as if blessing a child. Let it smell like good afternoons and read like common sense. You secure the strap on the camel with the bell tuned to "Don't worry." The camel flutters eyelashes, which counts as signed for. You also learn the negative space, what not to send. No knives, ever. Tools are fine, utensils are fine, but a blade without a kitchen attached just puts verbs in the wrong tense. No coins in a pouch alone. Money is too loud unless it travels as expenses with an itinerary. No gifts that can sour in the sun. Kindness should not ferment into gossip. The cat drafts a short policy, arching her back into the header. All edible diplomacy must pass the nap test. Smells good after, doesn't stain a cushion, encourages purring. Do you ever send something large? Not with this letter, not across this much weather, but you make a note beside a river bend to fund, quietly, a shade awning at a customs bench that has always needed one. You ask the priestess to dedicate a tree gift to a temple with a courtyard that bakes. You remind yourself that sometimes the finest gift is the one that's hard to wrap. Fixing a well, mending a rope ferry, teaching a clerk how to tie a tamper-evident knot. Light joke number 3 pads in with 4 quiet paws. You propose gifting the crocodile a pair of reading glasses so he can better supervise seals. The river declines, politely, on behalf of its resident. Before the caravan rises, you sit with the queen and read the letter aloud against the rustle of textiles and the comfort clink of little jars. The words hold their temperature, warm as bread, cool as mint water, never hot. The gifts lean against the sentences like cushions that make the conversation want to linger. The seal rings rate in their wooden sky. The lion will press its patient paw again when the cord finishes its bow. Outside, the road exhales smells of dust, honey, and a future that prefers shade to slogans. You lift the basket, and the strap finds its old place across your shoulder. Somewhere beyond the wall, a child laughs, which you take as an omen that the day will honor small kindnesses. The cat escorts you to the door, which counts as royal approval. You step into the white of the sun with a packet that weighs a little more than paper and much less than worry, and you feel, as the bell begins its soft, familiar note, that generosity is strategy and also a lullaby for the road. Not every sentence reaches the ears it trains for. You learn this the way boatmen learn wind, by counting the days something should have arrived and listening for the silence where footsteps ought to be. When a letter goes missing, the palace doesn't panic. It inhales, it opens its ledgers, and it follows the shadow the message left behind. You sit with the scribe and the cat, who has naturally accepted the unpaid position of dead letter office supervisor, and you begin to catalog delays, losses, and backups the way gardeners catalog pests and remedies, calmly, with a broom and a schedule. First, the weather eats. A low flash flood resets a wadi, and a caravan chooses prudence over punctuality. A wind sulks for 3 nights, and oars rehearse patience until shoulders file complaints with the current and wind club. Light joke 1, dues accepted in olives. Heat lifts glue from leather. Damp teaches papyrus how to curl into a shy tube. Mainstream fact to steady your thinking. In Ptolemaic and Roman Egypt, contracts and official letters often traveled as double documents, an inner sealed text with an outer summary visible without breaking the seal. 2 layers so that if one failed, the other still told the gist. Your scribe copies the habit, drafting a neat docket in red that can be recreated from any temple daybook along the route. Second, life eats. Beetles with scholarly appetites discover that gum arabic is delicious. A goat edits a basket because straw smells like lunch. A bored ferryman sets a lamp too close to a fold, and the wax remembers it is born of flame. That is why the palace keeps 3 kinds of backup. 1, a temple ledger copy, You watch the priest stamp it in red, a time mark in a place that thinks in centuries. 2. A twin letter drafted the same morning with the same courtesies sent by the other road. River, if the desert carried the first, sand if the river did. So that weather has to make 2 different mistakes from keeping a sentence from working. 3. A human backup. Your courier carries in his mouth a brief oral version, the gist compressed to a polite, memorizable knot. Greeting, request, gift, memory. If the papyrus sinks, the sentence still walks. 3. People eat. Well, not the letter, but the day around it. Porters miscount, a clerk misfiles, a market argument hums louder than a fairy horn. That is why coverings exist. Every time a letter touches a temple, a customs wicket, or a ferry office, a small line goes into a daybook with who, what, when, and the docket words in red. If Rome later sighs that something never arrived, the palace can braid a new letter from a chain of receipts. Your office saw us at dawn 3 days past. The ferry at Syene docketed us at mid-afternoon with mint water. The temple near the cinnamony priests stamped us before the bell that says, "Don't worry." It is harder to deny a thread woven by several looms. You keep a shelf of remedies. A shadow letter travels inside a parcel of goods, not hidden, just practical, tucked among stamped loaves headed to the same clerk who likes shade awnings. A courier leaves a whisper, 2 lines of gist, at a friendly sanctuary, sealed with the office mark and dated, so that if everything fails, someone can copy the whisper into a proper voice. Quirky tidbit to pocket. Some messengers carry a tiny twist of dyed thread, blue for river, red for desert, nodding once for each checkpoint. If the letter vanishes, the thread returns with a map and knots, and even the cat admits that cord can take notes. You walk through worst-case rehearsals because that is how couriers sleep at noon. If thieves appear, they prefer goods you can eat or wear. Letters taste of homework. The messenger has orders to give them the olives and keep the seals. If a boat stumbles at a gnarly cataract and Papyrus learns the backstroke badly, the pilot knows to scoop the packet into a jar kept for grain measures, the ancient splash-proof emergency box, until leather can be mended. If a camel refuses a ford, the caravan captain understands that the letter rides the smallest, surest saddle. Pride can cross later. Historians still argue whether Kush maintained a formal state relay, stages, posts, official messengers, like the Persian Royal Road or Rome's Cursus Publicus, or whether the system braided temple networks and merchant guilds ad hoc. What you live is simple. Redundancy is a kind of piety. When something truly fails, reconstruction begins. You and the scribe open the temple daybooks you've charmed with cinnamon, copying the docket words, the date, the seals used, even the little diagnostic scratch across the clay. You send a replacement that begins with the most civilized admission in any century. Our earlier letter seems to have chosen a longer road. Please accept this copy, sealed as before, with our apologies and a small rope for your portage foreman. Light joke 2 yawns politely. You add, and a membership invitation to the Current and Wind Club for any clerk who carried the ledger up 3 stairs, and the cat stamps it with a whisker. Some failures teach. The scribe keeps a tray of retired disasters, a bulla that cracked too fast and dropped like an impatient fig, a wax seal that slumped in heat into a sad little pond, a fold that left the cord too proud and invited a knife. He lets you handle them so your palms learn not to trust hope where technique should live. He also keeps a tile inscribed with 3 don't forgets. Write dates in both systems, Rignum and Moon, list the gifts without prices, and praise the recipient's shade. The last entry is not a joke. In frontier offices, practical flattery keeps papers visible on top of stacks. There are stories that become proverbs. A courier once lost a packet to a gust and dove like a cormorant. The letter survived, and the man joined the club's Hall of Fame, shoulders and all. Another time, a temple ledger burned when a careless cook told a joke too near an oil lamp, but the priest had copied yesterday's entries on an ostracon that survived under a stool, and so a shipment of salt found its way before fish remembered how to complain. Another time, your favorite, the governor's desk claimed no letter had arrived until the cat from that office brought the missing leather slip into the courtyard at noon, dropped it at the clerk's feet, and demanded back pay in sunbeams. Light joke 3 takes a bow. All subsequent replies from that desk begin with, "We thank the feline courier for her diligence." Not every absence is anyone's fault. Sometimes the river simply wants a sentence for itself and keeps it like a secret. When that happens, the backup you tucked into a braid of incense reaches the same desk 2 days later, and business proceeds as if the gods prefer narrative suspense. The Queen's rule is steady. Never scold wind or water in a letter. They do not read, and people who do will only sigh. Instead, you send the replacement with a gift that tells hands you're grateful. Lamp oil for late copying, rope for safe portaging, a mat for shade, and you add one memory so the new letter feels like a friend who is always coming anyway. By evening, your checklist is simple. Temple ledger, tick. Twin route, tick. Oral gist, rehearsed, tick. A spare seal and a scrap of linen tucked where emergencies like to be found, tick. You write on the docket, "If seen by a friendly desk, please read the red words, breathe, and pass it along." You smile at the cat. She blinks her approval and issues no late fees. Somewhere in the reeds, herons hold a governance summit and refuse as usual to acknowledge your office memos. You do not negotiate with herons, but you compliment their knees in a postscript anyway, just in case they're learning to read. By the time the lamps learn their small, steady ovals, you are shelving the day. The scribe leads you into a cool back room where baskets stack like calm thoughts and cords hang in measured loops along a wall. Outside, the desert combs its own hair with wind. Inside, you count in whispers. You place the Queen's outletters, clay and wax healed to their final color, into reed trays lined with linen. Docket edges turned up so time can read them without clearing its throat. A bell tuned to "Don't Worry" glides once as the door settles. Somewhere, a camel remembers bedtime and agrees. Archivists, the scribe tells you, do not store paper, they store promises. He writes the day's last line in the register, red rubric, steady as a heartbeat, and you feel the room nod. Mainstream fact to lay in the shelf with those bundles. Throughout the Nile world, archives sit in palaces and temples alike. Ostraca and papyri keep company with tax ledgers, flood marks, and land deeds. And sealed boule turn up later with the ghost of a knot on their backs. Receipts from time. Here in Kush, the habit holds even if the paper sleeps lighter. Marrow keeps its voice in many places, some under painted lions, some under the plain roof of the storehouse that smells like basket, resin, and patience. You stamp a small lotus on the outer fold of one packet, not the seal, just the scribe's promise, and file it in the tray marked for the river desk that likes mint in its ink. The cat supervises from a shelf, a velvet paperweight with opinions, eyes half closed in that senior archivist way. She approves the spacing with a whisker and resumes auditing the sunbeam budget, which at night converts to lamplight allocations. Light joke number 1 pads in. You whisper that she's about to unionize. She yawns in legal language and finds you 2 dates payable at dawn. On the workboard, you make a small museum of the day. A used clay boula with the lion and lotus impression crisp. A smear of wax scented with the faintest resin. A bit of cord showing the square knot that keeps friendships honest. The reed pen that refused to hurry. You tuck into the tray of backups the twin letter bound for the desert route, because redundancy is the lullaby archives sing to themselves. Quirky tidbit to keep for future storms. Some rooms hang dried mint and laurel from the rafters to discourage bookworms, and others, more skeptical, scatter a pinch of clean sand on shelves to remind the papyrus it lives in a land that likes honesty under the fingers. When you lift a basket destined for the longer shelf, the sort that will hold for seasons rather than weeks, you tie a blue thread around its handle, not fashion, just the house code for river route concluded. Next to it, a red thread means sand completed. A small knot in both tells you a letter traveled braided, one by water, one by desert, and both returned home to sleep. The scribe marks the register with that unhurried script that looks like swallows stitching the dusk. Historians still argue whether Meroitic correspondence lived mostly in a central palace archive here at Meroe, or dispersed across temples at Napata, Musawarat, and border stations, each keeping local memory like a well keeps water. You breathe in the cinnamon memory of a certain temple's ledger and decide the answer is yes. Many rooms, one habit. Write, seal, docket, rest. A narrow drawer opens to receive the ring tray of reference impressions, the little cupcakes of clay threaded on cord, each stamped once, each labeled with a name or office. You filed today's lion and lotus beside yesterday's. The steward's seal stands neatly with its cousins. You notice the backs, faint weaves of linen, the twist of cord, a fingerprint that might as well be a small portrait of a hand that once believed in afternoons. You think of tomorrow's archaeologist sighing over that thread mark, like a baker admiring a perfect crumb, and you lay the piece down gentler than before. The scribe shows you how memory travels even when nothing moves. He slides a thin board into the stand beside the door. Today's docket lines summarized in 3 voices: Meroitic for the room itself, Demotic for river neighbors who may check, Greek for the clerk who will send for copies when his desk wants to admire its own order. Light joke number 2 leans on the jam. You call it splash-proof transparency, and he agrees, provided the leather sleeve gets a ceremonial mention in next year's festival of good paperwork. You make callbacks without trying, the way a river repeats bends. A tiny CIN on the margin of the register, your quiet code for pleasant clergy, reminds you of the temple that stamped your letter beside offered bread. A note about don't negotiate with herons appears on a scrap, not policy, just culture. The bell hums once when you set it down. The silent stone, borrowed from the council circle, rests on the windowsill, now collecting a little night cool, ready to keep tomorrow's voices measured. In a shallow cupboard, the scribe keeps retired disasters for training: the bula that cracked too soon, the wax that melted into a sad pond, the fold that invited a knife. You handle each the way a pilot handles a rock worn smooth by the river's longer grammar. He also keeps 3 tiles lettered with "Don't Forgets," "Date both ways," "List gifts, not prices," "Praise the recipient's shade." You set them back like small commandments a sleepy God could love. When the last basket meets its shelf, you sweep. It is not busy work, it is punctuation. Sand whispers against reed, the broom makes a grammar the floor agrees with, and the cat walks the edge like a cursive flourish. You pinch a touch of date syrup to your wrist, gnats please behave, and smile at the memory of the courier's night steps along the Nile's damp stripe. Light joke number 3 lingers at the threshold. You draft a membership card to the Current and Wind Athletic Club for the archivists. Benefits include mint water, shade awnings, and the right to say "eroso" at closing time, and file it under "humor helpful." Lamp wicks shorten, stars lengthen. You slide the bolt not to keep anything out, but to tell the room its sentences may sleep. Beyond the wall, herons hold another knee-high parliament. You wish them good minutes and keep your policy of non-negotiation intact. The desert relaxes into its own huge hush, and the river repeats what correspondence always meant to say. We can carry many things if we balance them well and talk to the wind first. You breathe slower. The cat purrs. Somewhere under a threshold in a city of steep pyramids, bronze keeps its quiet watch. Somewhere in a palace that smells of resin and bread, a folded square believes it can adjust the future by adjusting a sentence. And you, shelving it by starlight, believe that too. And now let everything grow softer, like the last warmth leaving the paving stones when evening finally wins. You are still in that quiet room. You can feel it, but the angles have rounded, and the shelves lean back into the walls like friends who no longer need to speak. The lamp draws a smaller circle. The wick settles into its own calm. The smoke is only a faint ribbon, patient, almost a memory of cinnamon. If you listen closely, the bell tuned to "Don't Worry" has nothing left to say. It is simply there, the possibility of reassurance, tucked like a smooth stone in a pocket you will not need to turn out. You sit, and the chair receives you. The cat folds itself into an agreeable comma and files a final, contented purr. Outside, the river keeps being a river, which tonight is enough. The desert keeps being a desert, which tonight is also enough. The letters rest exactly where they should, their seals cooled, their chords relaxed, their docket words turned upward like faces in sleep. You can trace with your fingertip in the air the path that brought them here. Boat, bell, shade, mint, kindness, and feel each step become lighter as it joins the next. If any roughness still rides in your breath, let it drift off like husk brushed from papyrus. In its place, put the weight of small certainties, the way a knot tells the truth, the way sand adds gentleness to a seal, the way a name written carefully remembers to be kind. Imagine the moon walking down the corridor and peeking in, satisfied, then moving on to count roofs and wells and slow, steady hearts. There is nothing else to lift. There is nothing else to carry. The story has folded itself properly and chosen its shelf. Let your eyes soften the last bright edges. Let your shoulders forget about noon. Let your thoughts find a place next to the cat, somewhere warm and quiet, where even memory sleeps with a smile. Good. Stay. Rest. End of story. Sweet dreams.